Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my long-term review of what I would consider to be the very best of the plastic fantastics on the Sony platform, and that is Samyang's Autofocus 45mm F1.8. Now, this is definitely a plastic fantastic. It is made up of very lightweight materials, just plastics. It weighs in at only 162 grams, and so it is very compact, it is very lightweight, and there's nothing that is particularly impressive about the build, except for the fact I've been using this lens now for 3 years. It has held up perfectly well, and if anything, as we're going to detail in this review, it's actually gotten better since I first reviewed it, and I'll detail why in just a moment. This is a lens that I have come to really love. 45mm, of course, is not quite 50mm, but it's a focal length that I find very useful for a lot of applications. It's one that I really love as a walk-around kind of lens, but as we're going to see in our image quality breakdown, it's a lens that I reach for really often for family type events. It's just a great angle of view for a lot of things in the house, being with family, and just capturing those moments that matter. And so it's a lens that I love. It retails right now, the price at MSRP at the beginning was $399. Right now you can get this lens for $299, 300 bucks, and yet it delivers images that really have a special quality. When I first reviewed it back in 2019, I mentioned that already I perceived it to have something of a vintage rendering, some of the quality of the lenses from ages past that I really loved. And I continue to feel that way. I just like the look of images that come off of it. And we'll detail why as a part of today's review. But first, a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Phantom Wallet, the minimalist, modern wallet that sets you free from a bulky traditional wallet while also making it easy to access your cards and money when you need them, thanks to their unique fanning mechanism. Visit phantomwallet.com to check out their unique sizes, styles, and finishes that span from aluminum to wood to carbon fiber. You can even customize your wallet with new accessories like a money clip, cash holder, ID display, and even the Chipolo tracking integration if you're the kind of person who loses their wallet. Use code DUSTIN15 for 15% off when you're ready to check out. So as noted, there isn't a whole lot going on here in terms of the build. It does come with a nice case. It does come with a shallow lens hood, so those boxes are checked. But outside, it's just smooth plastics and a focus ring. There is no weather sealing on this lens, unfortunately. Something that Samyang has moved to in the years since that point, but nothing here. There's no switches here. The focus ring is just a focus ring and does nothing else. And so really nothing here in terms of bells and whistles. We have a small 49mm front filter thread up front, and the lens itself is about 62 millimeters in diameter and right over 56 millimeters in length. And so this is truly a lens that you can fit inside the palm of your hand, and as noted, it is so lightweight that I throw it into my bag, and even if I never pull it out, I don't feel bad about bringing it along because the weight is so light. And in fact, I've gone on hikes with this lens where I didn't even have the camera on a strap. I was just carrying the camera in my hand, but again, the weight being so insignificant that I never really noticed it. And so not a lot in terms of build quality, but as I've noted, it's held up as well. It looks as new as the day that I got it, and I've had zero issues with the build quality over the time. And so sometimes, lenses that appear, inexpensively made are, sometimes they're just lightweight and not necessarily poorly made. And that seems to be the case with this lens. Outside of that, everything is pretty straightforward. One thing that I will say that's not particularly impressive about the lens is that it doesn't have a great magnification level. You can focus as closely as 45 centimeters, and that gives you a 0.12 times magnification. Fortunately, it does still produce pretty shallow depth of field shots, but it doesn't give you a lot of magnification. It does have 9 rounded aperture blades, and so maintains a decent circular shape when stopped down. But again, nothing about the specs is going to jump out and grab you. As I noted, the things have gotten better over time, and that is because this lens, initially the autofocus was still in a stage to where there was room to grow, we'll just say. Some focus inconsistencies, a tendency to be a little jittery sometimes when tracking during video, but fortunately between both Samyang firmware updates, and I believe that this is at least on firmware 3 at this point. By the way, you do have to have the Samyang lens station to do those firmware updates. I would love to see them move move in the future to having something like just a USB port on the lens itself. But for the moment, you need that lens station. It's worth having, however, if you're going to buy any of these Samyang lenses, because it does mean that you can get firmware updates, and they do actually continue to update the lenses. So between their firmware updates and then with Sony's own firmware updates, I have seen just a constant improvement to where this has become a lens that I really rely on. In fact, I use it all the time for video work on my channel. Now, as you can see in the focus pulls, it is not the fastest when it comes to focus changes. It's kind of tuned to be more smooth, but you'll also see that there's a lot of confidence on it's not settling or pulsing, it's just getting there, locking on, and so that part is good. It also did a good job in terms of transitioning from my hand to my face and tracking. And more importantly, because I've now been using this lens for 3 years, I know that it just works. It works very well for video. I have no hesitation of setting it up like I am right now, where I'm sitting in front of a camera and I know with confidence it's going to track my face. It's not going to be pulsing. It's not going to be jumping around. It just gets the job done. On top of that, I have found it to be a very reliable partner for shooting all kinds of subjects, be it outdoor subjects, you know, just kind of general purpose subjects, but also for portrait work, for, as I noted, for those family type events. I just feel like I can rely on the autofocus consistently. And again, for a lens that is so compact, inexpensive, and lightweight, it just makes it a fun package to use. I'll also note that this does have a linear type focus motor in it, but again, the focus for stills, I noted that it's not super fast for video focus changes, but for stills it always seems to have adequate speed to me, and I've even been able to track action fairly well with it, you know, runners running the bases, things like that, and so no problems there. And so I really, after the firmware updates, I have nothing but good to say about autofocus. And I really have nothing but good to say about image quality. This is not a perfectly corrected lens, but I think in many ways it's all the better for it. And as we're going to see on our image quality section, this really delivers a very impressive image quality for a lens that is this inexpensive. In fact, I would take images off of this lens, off of a lot of lenses that are much more expensive. And I'll detail more about that in our final conclusion. Let's start by taking a look at vignette and distortion. As you can see, distortion is pretty close to non-existent, just a minimal amount, but you can also see that vignette is somewhat heavy. Of course, that is part of what gives the lens some of its character as well. There is a standard profile in Adobe products these days, and I'm sure other pieces of software at this point that clear things up nice and easy, but if you want to look at the manual corrections, you can see I've dialed in a +1 to get rid of the last little bit of distortion, and then vignette being a bit heavier, a +53, and sliding the midpoint all the way over to 0. In this case, that's a little over or right around 2 stops in the corner, so not like overly severe, but certainly that would be one of those two things, that's the optical weakness. Now, as I noted in my initial review, this is not a lens that is completely free of any kind of fringing. You can see a little bit of green fringing in the background and a little bit of purple fringing beforehand. At the same time, I wouldn't say it is extreme either, and certainly not something that I see showing up in images on a global level like this. I pick it up on these high-resolution cameras at a pixel level, but it's nothing that is backbreaking. Now, since the release of this lens, I've been testing it on increasingly higher resolution cameras. So this is my current highest one that I own, which is the Alpha one, so 50 megapixels. And despite that, the lens really continues to show up really strongly. So here in the center of the frame at f1.8, you can see that contrast is not like at the highest of levels, but resolution and contrast is quite good. Stop down even just 1/3 of a stop to f2, and you do increase that contrast a bit. However, where the lens really shows up well is you can see that the mid-frame result is extremely strong, only marginally better at f2. And if we go all the way down into the corners, it's still very, very good in the corners, even at f1.8. So that just means that everywhere you look in the frame, you've really got a nice amount of resolution. And, you know, that's just really impressive in such an inexpensive and compact optic like this. If you stop on down to f2.8, you can see now that resolution and contrast are at extremely high levels, and you can see that Mar pattern really emerging, which I tend to just see when lenses are really sharp. But everything is really crisp and nicely delineated. The mid-frame result here at f2.8 is just really fantastic. We can look down here. You see lots of resolution in all of my various bills that I use. And then right down into the corner here, we can see that now our resolution, even right out to the very edge of the frame, is looking really, really nice. Just a really strong performance. And if we take a look at, just another new spot, you can see that that resolution contrast is just bumped up enough to where it is really exceptional. Also worth looking at here at f2.8 is you can see we've got good centering, good results up in this corner. And if we pop up here, we also see good results there. So this is a lens that's now been used for 3 or 4 years and still holding up well. You can see at f4 that there is yet another bump in terms of resolution, which is now looking really fantastic. And on to f5.6, where there is just the slightest edge more. If we pop down here into the corners, we can see that there is a little bit more obvious improvement at f5.6 down in the corner, where corners are really, really sharp. This lens is very crisp now all across the frame. So we hit our practical limit at f5.6. You can see at f8, we're really not looking any sharper. Anything beyond here, diffraction will start to set in. Our minimum aperture is f22, but as you can see, diffraction has really robbed a lot of the contrast. The overall detail is not too bad, but you can just see that everything is a little bit mushy even compared to f1.8 wide open. I usually avoid anything beyond f11 if at all possible. Now, our maximum magnification is nothing to write home about here. It is 0.12 times, which is really not all that great. You can see that up-close performance is okay. It's not exceptional, but in the center of the frame, it is pretty good detail and contrast that is there. We can also see that there is some field curvature, so as you move off of that center of focus, you start to lose that detail. But always with this lens, less than the technical performance, it has been just the look of the images. There's something about this lens that really has just a great rendering to it. Now you can see the detail looks really great around the puppy's eyes, so that's great, but just look at the quality of the fall off, which is a huge cut above what you typically would see from a nifty 50 type lens. Another example here, you can just see that the quality and the softness of the bokeh is just really, really nice. Another example here where I'm just really surprised at how creamy that background looks, and frankly, without being hyperbolic, it really feels like the look of a Zeiss type lens in terms of that rendering, which is really surprising from such a small and inexpensive lens. Another example here where there's just a lot of quality to that defocus, and then of course the fact that the lens is also quite sharp on the pixel level, even on a 50 megapixel body, is really impressive. Here's another image here, and I shot this a few weeks ago during that kind of ugly transition season in between, as winter is leaving and spring is arriving, but nothing's green out there. But you can see that the detail here is just beautiful. But then even in this potentially busy background here, where, we're got a lot of stuff in a transition zone, it really is just handled in an artful way that I just think has a very nice rendering quality to it. One more shot at that same time, and you can just see once again, the combination of good detail here in the focus area. And yeah, there's a little bit of fringing that is definitely there. But as you look at the sum total of the image, you have a nice three-dimensional quality here of the subject and a nice looking defocused background. We'll revisit this image just for a moment. We looked at it for chromatic aberration, but now just kind of look at it as a whole and look at the nice transition towards defocus, which just goes to highlight how nice the lens is. I'll also note here that we've got some really bright morning sunlight, just right out of frame, and we're not getting any kind of crazy flare artifacts that are destroying the image. I found this to be a pretty nice portrait lens over the years. You can see here, detail is good. We've got a good subject separation, which of course is helped by the fact that this is a strobed image, but looking very nice. Another here where you can just see detail is very nice. The whole setting is nice. It is a nice perspective, I find, for portrait work, and certainly has delivered me some good results over the years. And again, just the sum total of the rendering combined with with the detail. This is on the Alpha 9A9 here, and so not quite as high of resolution, but you can just see that the quality of the rendering is really nice. The utter lightweight of the lens has made it a really nice hiking and walk around type lens. It would be a nice street lens because of the focal length. And you can see detail here is just really nice and crisp. But because it's so light, you can carry it around all day and not even think about it. I found it just kind of, for that purpose, walking around in the evening. Maybe I should want to throw a camera as we're strolling around. And here you can see beautiful colors, nice detail on that image. Inside a restaurant type setting, you can just see that it's captured light well. It's just a fun lens to use, period. Also able to capture some nice rich colors with it, and just again, the quality of the image, even for shooting landscapes, is really quite nice. Where this lens has really shown for me, though, is when it comes to these kind of family type moments. I really like the 45mm perspective. This is a lens I've often pulled out. This is, date night out with my wife, going back here, birthday for my youngest son. It's come out a lot of times at family events, just capturing those moments of being with people that you care about, again, birthdays, just various moments. And there's just something about it where, as you can see here, I really like the fall off and the rendering. And again, if we dive in just to look at the detail here, even in an indoor setting, you can see that the detail is just really nice. IAF has been really consistent and delivered a very nice result. And so as a byproduct of this is a lens that I reach for often for different settings just because it is fun to use, and I end up really liking the results. So as you can see, this lens produces, number one, if you stop it down a bit, it's extremely sharp, and even wide open, it delivers a lot of sharp results, in the center 2/3 of the frame. And as a byproduct, I just really love the images that I get out of it. But it's not just kind of the sharpness or the technical aspects, and it's never really been about that. I think it actually does surprisingly well on those merits, and even though it does have a bit of chromatic aberration, I think the trade-off is that the bokeh is softer and smoother as a byproduct of that. But it's more about the overall rendering of the images, to where I just instinctively like the look of images that come off that. And for that reason, I personally would choose this lens over, say, something like the Sony Zeiss 55mm F1.8, which I found to be a perfectly good lens in terms of its technical performance. I just didn't really ever get all that excited about the images that I got off of it. Whereas this, I just feel like there's something special about the rendering. So if you're looking for a street type lens, an everyday, normal-ish type focal length, and you're not so stuck on it having to be 50mm, check out the Samyang 45mm F1.8. I can tell you that anecdotally, there's a lot of people who have followed my recommendation, have bought this lens, and have written back saying how much they love it. And really, at a price point of $300, there's really nothing else that compares that's going to give you the kind of image quality that this lens does, at such a low price point. And so it's well worth your consideration. I'm Dustin Abbott, and if you look in the description down below, I have added a long-term section to my image gallery. If you want to check that out, there's also linkage to my original text review as well. Beyond that, of course, there's buying links if you want to purchase one, linkage to follow myself or Craig on social media, or to check out our new channel at The Light in TV. You can also get channel merchandise. You can become a patron. And of course, if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and let the light in.